All right. So the purpose of today is to make sure that every single one of you in the room and the carriers that you work for stay as relevant as possible. I'm sure you all have seen in the news, just in March, we've had 2 different fleets with 100 to 500 trucks go out of business, right? We've seen another massive fleet get acquired by another massive fleet, right? So let's stay as relevant as possible. If the rate of change inside of your organization is slower than the rate of change outside of your organization, you become less relevant. So in the fall of 2021, I gave a presentation with this exact same title, okay, which is Moving Beyond Crisis Recruiting. If you think about the time that we were in then, it's very different than the time we're in now, okay? And we'll get into that, and I'll explain what on earth that all means, okay? All right. So this was the crisis then. So if we think back to the pandemic when everything shut down, and then it came back online, freight volume shot through the roof, so did freight rates, but the driver pool didn't, right? So raise your hand if at any point in the past 3 years you were under any kind of pressure to find drivers. Anybody? Thank you. Yes, okay, a few of you, right? I think just about everybody should have been under pressure to find drivers at one point in the past 3 years. All right. There we go. So why did the driver pool not follow suit? Well, here's a few reasons why at that time the driver pool wasn't expanding at the same rate. We had a lot of new fleets entering the market. We had a lot of drivers retiring, worried about the pandemic, health issues. Unemployment benefits were phenomenal at that time. Think of a few years back. A lot of local work, just a general labor shortage, school closures. So all these things contributed to the driver pool getting smaller, shrinking. All right, so take a look at this. This is a good indicator of driver demand, is the number of job postings out there saying, hey, we need some drivers, right? So you can clearly see the nice little dip there, right, during the pandemic, and then it just skyrockets through the roof, right? And then it kind of flattens out a little bit, and then tails off again. Really good indicator of what's going on with drivers in the market. All right, so how about on the supply side? You might expect to see the exact same thing, but you don't, right? You see about 1.5 million drivers looking for work, and it holds fairly steady, obviously drops during the pandemic, comes back up to about normal rates. And then the end of 2021, beginning of 2022, it starts to go up again. So it didn't follow the same pattern. Any guesses as to why? There's probably a number of reasons, but why do you think the demand for the supply of drivers started to shoot up like that? Any guesses? Okay, re-entering the workforce, going back over the road. Yep, 100%. And why are they re-entering the workforce? Perfect. All right, so take a look at this. I guess it gets cut off. Oh, you can kind of see it at the top. So one thing that I did before this was dig into our database, something called Strategize. And I looked in Louisville, Kentucky. I was able to see that there were 3,161 job posts for drivers in the past 30 days from 485 unique companies. But the thing I really wanted to point to was the median advertised yearly wage, $90,000, okay? So everything that you said, Stephen, was absolutely true. And I'll add on top of it, raise your hand if you raised driver pay at any point in the past 3 years. I think just about everybody's hand's going to go up, right? $90,000 was the median advertised yearly wage, okay? So that is another reason why drivers start coming into the markets. They can make some pretty dang good money, right? I think if you would have looked at the same chart 3 years ago, what do you think it would have said as the median advertised? My guess is probably around 60,000, maybe 65. Took a huge leap, okay? All right, so let's look at a slide that combines the ratio of these two things. Driver job seekers per job, okay? In January, just this past January, there were 11 driver job seekers for every driving job posted. Highest it's ever been. So think about that. 11 drivers looking for work for every one job being posted. During the pandemic, it got as low as 2. So 2 drivers looking at every job being posted. So highest it's ever been since we started tracking this data back in 2019. So the market has definitely swung in the carrier's favor when it comes to finding drivers. So what are carriers doing? So take a look at this. This is the number of carriers putting out job posts, right, looking for drivers. One thing that you'll notice is what kind of dip happened in the past year. You've got 10,000 fewer fleets looking for drivers now than just a year ago. 10,000 fewer, right? That's pretty impressive when you really stop to think about it. Which makes sense considering some of the things that we're hearing. So Stephen and I were having a quick chat before I got up here. So what are some of the things that we're hearing? We work with hundreds of fleets across the country. We're hearing, hey, our fleet's full. We're at max capacity right now, right? Hey, freight is kind of softening right now, so we're going to wait and hold and see what happens, right? Miles are dropping. We can't get any new trucks. Or we've had trucks ordered, they just keep not delivering the new trucks to us, right? So these are some of the things that we're hearing. So at Randall Riley, we meet with what's called a client advisory board to get their feedback and ideas. And one thing that they said to us is about half the group during the pandemic paused their driver advertising altogether, said, whoop, we don't need drivers, we're going to go ahead and turn that sucker off, turn the faucet off. The other half held the course. They're like, you know what, maybe scale back a little bit, but we're going to keep going. And what we learned from that is the group that said they put their advertising completely on pause fell way behind the group that didn't when things turned back on. Right? Well, why? Well, because they shut the pipeline off, right? They went 3 months without hiring anybody, without having new leads coming in. All of a sudden, it skyrockets the demand, but the pipeline dried up because they weren't adding anything new into that. So here's the crisis now. If you notice, each arrow is flipped the other direction. Freight volume's down, freight rates are down, but the driver pool is up. So check out this chart from a guy that I follow on LinkedIn. His name is Jason Miller. I'll just give him a shout out. Professor at Michigan State University. And this isn't mine. Once again, I'll give him the credits. But basically what this shows is capacity in the past 6 to 9 months has now outpaced employment, right? Or other way around. Employment has outpaced the freight demand, right? So yeah, capacity. So FTR forecasts show both a weakening freight forecast and capacity gains in the coming months will lead to a drop in the active truck utilization rate to 84% by quarter 4 of this year, which would be the lowest utilization rate since quarter 4 of 2015. So lowest truck utilization rate by the end of the year since 2015. So with fewer fleets going after the bigger driver pool, competition for drivers has dropped naturally, right? So let's take a look at what that means in the advertising space, okay? So the green line is the past few months, and then you can see compared to the previous years, the cost per lead for a driver has dropped very significantly, which makes sense because when it comes to cost per lead, you're competing in a marketplace that's supply and demand, okay? What about cost per hire? You would expect, because the cost per lead dropped way down, what about the cost per hire? So it dipped. It dipped significantly in January. In fact, it's the lowest it's been since February of 2021. But my question then is, if cost per lead dropped so much, why did cost per hire not drop equally as low? Any guesses? Anybody want to throw it out there? Oh, David Miller, what do you think?
I think we need to be more selective since Tuesday higher rates are probably higher.
100%, yeah. So if you didn't hear what he said, in a normal market, it takes 40 leads to get to one hire, okay? In the current market, it's 50 leads to get to a hire, which sounds odd, but it's because fleets can be more selective, right? They can say, hey, during the peak of everything, when we really needed drivers, we went ahead and lowered our qualifications just a little bit. We only need 6 months of experience. Well, what's going on now? All of a sudden, the drivers need 2 years of experience. Makes sense, right? Bring in the higher quality driver. All right. So I'll read it to you. It looks like it's mostly on there. So I went out and looked at another industry to kind of see what they're doing, right? Sometimes we try to reinvent the wheel. Why not look and see what everybody else is doing? And if it's working, go do it. So when your growth isn't that impressive, you've got to find something. Tesla and Salesforce have found it. Okay, recent article. Any guesses as to what Tesla and Salesforce found? Let's take a look. Efficiency is the tech industry's new favorite word. Efficiency. Let's dive a little deeper into what some quotes from that. It says, the tech industry is in transition. Sound familiar? A lot like trucking, right? Industry in transition. The resounding theme was Tesla can drive growth by increasing efficiency across the organization. So that's what Tesla's doing. COO of Salesforce said this. Let me catch up here. He said, we're inspecting every part of our business to find opportunities to drive efficiencies. What did the CEO of Salesforce say? He said, we're kind of looking at this moment as, hey, we can reassess. This is an incredible moment. And I want that to hang a little bit, okay? This is an incredible moment. Well, why on earth? You just gave us a bunch of news. Why would this be an incredible moment? Well, what are all the things that you've been putting off for the past couple of years? Right? We've all been trying to keep our heads above water, like, find drivers, we got to find drivers, the freight's great, the rates are great, we got to go do it. And all of a sudden, people are starting to back off. So think about all the things that you've put off for the past couple of years where you're like, yeah, I know we need to fix that, but we don't have time to do it right now. Hey, I know it would be awesome if we could improve that. We just don't have the time. We got to go, get those drivers, right? So be thinking about that as we dive into the next section here coming up. Oh, there's the quote. This is an incredible moment. So there's never been a better time than now to work on these things that I mentioned. So let's talk about what some of those things might be. So 4 pillars of talent acquisition: people, process, platforms, and people. All right, time for that number 2 pencil. So if you would, just take out your phone and just use that QR code. All it's going to do is take you to a survey, okay? It'll take you 30 seconds, I promise. It's nothing. It's going to give you 3 options, okay? You can be a manager, you can be a recruiter, or you could be a driver or a candidate, somebody looking for work. So just pick one of those 3 options. Are you a manager, a recruiter, or a driver? And just take a minute to fill that out. All right, I'll give you just a few more seconds to wrap that up. It's just a self-evaluation. When you get to the end, it's just going to give you a simple score like 10 out of 24 or something like that. It'll be real simple. All right. So I can get with you later if you want to see specifically how your answers fall into the 4 pillars of talent acquisition. But let me give you the summary here when we've done it with other big groups and show you what that looks like. So management, recruiters, drivers. So overall, recruiters gave the highest scores. Still not great at 58%, but it was the highest. Management, 49%, and drivers, 42%. So let's look at management. The thing they're most happy with is their partners. Okay? What about recruiters? The thing they're least happy with is their process. They're not very happy about the process they go through to recruit drivers. And then for drivers, it was also process. Okay? All right. So top response and lowest response. Let's go over those real fast. So for managers, their top response, 90% said, I'm confident, my partnerships help me hire more and faster. Great. For recruiters, I believe in the story I have to tell candidates. That's awesome too. For drivers, all my questions were answered honestly. 60% was the highest. On the lowest response, though, for drivers was 20%. I felt like the recruiter was on my side. For recruiters, I only work in one system with all the information I need, where and when I need it. And then for managers, I never have to interrupt my team to figure out what's going on. So now what we're going to do is I'm just going to toss out a few ideas. Like I said, we work with hundreds of fleets across the country, so we have the advantage of hearing what they're doing and things that work well, things that don't work well. So I'm going to toss out a few of those ideas. Hopefully sparks an idea for you, gives you something you can take back and run with. So let's dive into a couple of those. There's never been a better time than now to focus on people. So I recently finished a classic business book called Good to Great from Jim Collins. Highly recommend it. And basically what the book is about is they researched companies that did just that. They were good companies, but then they became great companies. And they were able to sustain that greatness for at least 15 years. So this is a really significant study, okay? And any guesses as to, and they studied common characteristics across these companies. What do you think the number one characteristic across these companies were? Yeah, it ties right into what we're seeing right here, because people are culture. Absolutely. Never a better time than now to focus on people. Now, the thing is, it's really tough to get the right people on board unless the right people know who you are and what you do, right? So I mentioned before a client advisory board, and we asked them who allocates budget towards employer branding. And this is their answer. So about 63% of fleets that we surveyed said they allocate some of their budget to employer branding. Of the budget they allocate, they said 93% of their budget is for lead generation, and the other 7% is for branding. Now, we took this a year ago, and I could guarantee you that if we were to resurvey these same fleets today, that has shifted, right? Because people need fewer leads, so maybe they cut that budget out, or maybe they shifted some of that budget to branding, employer branding, okay? So Trucker News, it's one of the media outlets that we own and operate. We asked drivers, before you start the job search process, do you already have in mind which fleets you're going to apply to? 68% of drivers said they do. I think the correlation here, and I'll bounce back real fast, between notice the percentage of employers that do branding and the percentage of drivers that have in mind where they're going to apply when the time comes. I don't think it's coincidence that those two things line up fairly closely. All right, so this is the analogy we always like to use, okay, is going down the cereal aisle and shopping for cereal. I don't know about you, but when I go down the cereal aisle to shop for cereal, I pretty much have in mind my favorite cereals that I'm going to buy, right? I already kind of know. It's rare that I look at one of those generic ones at the bottom and I go, man, I've never tried that one. I'm going to go ahead and pick that up today. That sounds good, right? I don't think I've ever done that. Are drivers thinking of you when they go down the cereal aisle? And I mean that figuratively, of course, right? Are they thinking of you? So let's quickly talk about some ways to brand. I'm not going to get into this too in depth, but somebody's telling your story. It might as well be you. So how do you control the narrative? How do you tell your story? I think video is one of the best ways to do it, right? Whether you're using TikTok or YouTube Shorts or just YouTube in general, Facebook, a lot of different ways to get your name out there, to get your culture, somebody else said it, out there. And those are some ways that you can do it. All right, so what's your brand worth to you? So here's results from a recent branding campaign we ran for our clients. I don't know why process and platform keeps popping up there. So branded search volume went up 77%. Website traffic went up 123%. Their hire ratio went from 40 to 1 down to 18 to 1. Their cost per hire dropped 68%. And their branded search hires tripled. So we have people push back all the time, like branding. We don't have money for branding, right? We lead generation. Just keep those leads coming in. But when you run the two together, look at the results. It's pretty impressive what happens there. So this is what you want drivers to be thinking when they go down the cereal aisle, right? You want to be Cinnamon Toast Crunch, which is the best cereal out there, in my opinion. That's what you want, is for them to be going down with that specific one in mind. All right. So, let me back up real fast. Anybody familiar with the term blue chipping? Bill, I see you nodding your head. I'll call on Bill there. Bill, what's blue chipping? Yeah. So, absolutely. So, let me back up here. So, in sports, blue chips are 4- and 5-star recruits. Oops. Did we lose it? There we go. All right. So I thought this was really interesting when I found it. One, because, and you can boo me if you want, whatever. I'm an Alabama fan. I live in Tuscaloosa, so, whatever. But in 2022, before the season started, 24/7 Sports put this out and said, there's only 15 teams that can win the national championship this year. Only 15. Were they wrong? No. Right? Georgia ended up winning it, and you had Michigan in the playoffs, and you also had, who am I missing? Ohio State in the playoffs, right? Now, TCU wasn't in these 15. They didn't end up winning the championship. They made it. But I don't know about you, but I would want to be one of those blue-chipping teams that has a chance to win one of the national championships, right? So what about when it comes to drivers? So ISS, you may be familiar, if you work with safety as well, with the basics score, right? Safety score. ISS uses that same type of system. And what it stands for is Inspection Selection System. So if you're red and you go through an inspection lane or through a weigh station and you're red, you're getting stopped. You're getting inspected. If you're yellow, you may get stopped. If you're green, keep on going. So it's pretty important to know what your score is and how to improve it. So one thing that we did just in preparation for this is I took a look at this fleet. I won't tell you who it is. I blocked them out. But they had an unsafe driving score of 74, which is too high. It's in the red. You're going to get stopped, okay, when you go in the inspection lane. And what you can do is you can say, hey, I'm at 74%, but I need to be in the green so that we quit getting stopped everywhere, okay? So you can select where you want to be, and then you can say, what do you want to target? VIN numbers, drivers, violations. So in this scenario here, what I did was I ran the VIN numbers because I didn't want to show actual drivers' names up here. But these, if you remove these 14 VINs from your fleet, the safety score would go from being in the red to being in the green. And that's what we call blue chipping, right? So you may say, my fleet's full, I don't need any drivers. Well, could you upgrade your fleet, right? Can you go out there and start blue chipping with those 4- and 5-star recruits? So when it comes to people, a couple ideas there: employer branding and blue chipping. All right. Never been a better time than now to focus on your process. All right. So let me quickly introduce you to my buddy, Hank Seeker. All right. So Hank Seeker is a unicorn driver. He's got 30 years of experience, never been in a single accident or incident, right? The perfect driver out there. Guy never turns down a load. He's always running hard, okay? He doesn't actually exist. Hank Seeker is me. It's the driver persona I use when I'm doing industry research. So if Hank Seeker's in your database, go ahead and delete him out because he's not real. But what I do with Hank Seeker is I go and fill out short forms on your websites and on your landing pages to secret shop you and to see what your process looks like. And I wanted to share a couple quick things here as a way of encouraging you to please secret shop yourself. Go through your own processes so you don't end up like this, where in 2023 you send me an email that says, start 2021 with $3,000 in the bank. That's embarrassing, right? Time to update your emails if that's what you're sending out. How about this one? I filled out a form with my real birthday. It's Hank Seeker's birthday too. And this was the first email I got. Only the date I put in wasn't for my birthday. So their system, the very first email that they send to a driver is a happy birthday email. Doesn't even, I mean, I love Carlton, but your family is how they sign it. I hope my family knows when my real birthday is. What do you notice about this email? Anybody notice anything interesting? Who's the email from? Yeah, who said that? The Human Resources Department of the world, I guess, right? Like, nowhere in the email does it say, not in the email address, not in the subject line, not in the from. I have no idea who this email came from. That's not a very good email if you send it to the driver and the driver's like, I don't know, Who are you? I have no idea who you are. And then this one here, don't worry, this has been fixed. If you happen to see the name on there, they've already fixed it. And they didn't care if I showed it. But when I filled out a short form on their website, I got 3 emails at the exact same time that said the exact same thing. Okay? The subject lines were different, but the emails themselves were all the same. So please go through your own processes. Never been a better time than now to take time to clean this stuff up. All right. So the other piece here is how do you work your database? There's all kinds of process things that you can find in here to improve on. But these are real benchmarks that you can use, okay? Industry averages. And that's a lot of data I just threw at you, but basically it's saying to get 250 hires, you would need 10,000 leads, okay? And then once again, these are just kind of industry averages, but of the 10,000 leads, you're probably only going to get a hold of 6,000 of them, or 60%. And of the ones that you get a hold of, only about half are going to be qualified for your job. And of the ones that you got a hold of and are qualified, only 14% are going to be scheduled for orientation. And of those that are scheduled for orientation, 85% will show up. And of those that show up, only 82% will end up getting hired. And of those that end up getting hired, only 98% will run a load. So rough averages. But the question I always like to ask when I put this up is, if you could only improve one of these steps by 5 percentage points, which one would you improve to get the greatest return? What is it? Leads, okay, that's a good answer. Any other brave souls want to throw one out there? Which step would you improve by 5 percentage points? It's just a math problem, and I'll show you the math. Okay, contact a qualified. That's a good one. All right, these are takeaways at each one. I'll very quickly go through these. So for the target phase, make sure the leads get to the right recruiter. You know, when I worked, I was the director of driver recruiting. We found within 10th Street a work list where leads were going that nobody was working. It was a waste of money. So make sure they're getting routed the right way. Label your leads. Tie those leads to the source so that you know what's working and what's not. Accelerate your speed to lead. So when I secret shop, or Hank Seeker does, he pays attention to how much time it took from when I filled something out to when I was contacted. Sometimes it's within 5 minutes. And sometimes it's within 2 weeks. Accelerate your speed to lead. You can use automation to do that. And then create a cadence of contact. I hear it all the time. How many times should I call my leads? Right? I use the 7 to 10 rule. 7 to 10 times over 7 to 10 days. Engage, that just prioritize, right? Prioritize the leads as they come in. Understand what converts and who you need to call. Commit, train continuously. Train continuously. I can't emphasize that one enough. In fact, let me quickly mention here on train, our Client Advisory Board talked about doing a type of training with the recruiters they've never really done before, which is how do you work a wait list? So in other words, their fleet is full, but they've got good drivers in the pipeline. How do you make sure that those drivers just don't give up and go away, but that you keep them engaged and let them know once something opens up, you're going to be right there to pick them up. Something new that they haven't had to train on before. And then inspect what you expect, right? If you expect them to put notes in the system, go ahead and check those and make sure it's happening. Mind the gap. Which all that means is once you commit them to come into work with you, and when they show up to orientation, what do those conversations look like in between? And monitor the vital signs. Once they do start with you, I hope they stay forever, but you got to monitor the vital signs. How are they doing? All right, so here's the numbers. Let's see if anybody was right. If you improved by 5 percentage points on your orientation show rate, you would see 15 more hires based off of the lead count that I shared earlier. Orientation attendee to hire rate, 15 more hires. If you improved your contact rate by 5%, 21 more hires. Your qualified lead rates, 28 more hires. Your scheduled for orientation rate, 89 more hires. So if you could only pick, keep hitting that. There we go. If you could only pick one area, now you can work on all of them, but if you could only pick one area to work on, let it be training your recruiters on the phone. Their conversations that are happening. That's where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. It's not me saying it, it's the math. If you did improve all these areas by just 5%, you would see 219 hires more, or essentially you would double the amount of hires you got from the exact same number of leads. This is just an example outside of our industry. I like to pull outside examples in of a company, a lighting company, that looked at their transcripts for customer service reps, and they picked out key negative words that, hey, when our customer reps say these words, the conversation goes poorly. And then they just trained their people on avoiding those words. So a quick example of that is, like in our world, would be a driver calling in and say, hey, I'm just looking for local. Y'all have local work? And instead of just saying, nope, because then the call's over, what if instead you trained your recruiters to say, we've got a number of home time options. Tell me a little bit about what you're currently doing. Now you're still in a conversation. You're going to learn more about that driver. Maybe you do have a good fit for him or her, right? Simple changes like that can make a huge difference. In fact, with this company, they saw their customer effort score go down, which is a good thing, by 18.5% lower than the industry average. Another opportunity that's never been better than right now is to go ahead and cross-train your people, right? So if you have people in safety that can work in recruiting, put them there. Recruiting into safety, operations, sales, cross-train. Best time to do it right now. Right? Put them in that learning zone instead of just go, 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 perform, perform, perform. All right, so secret shopping and the efficiency formula, it's just a math problem, right, when it comes down to it. All right, let me catch up on this one. All right, never a better time than now to work on your platforms, technology, right? All right, and there we go. All right, quick informal survey. I like to try to get you all involved, so it's just not me talking here. Raise your hand if you could count the number of steps that you took today. Like whether you've got a smartphone or watch. You don't have to actually look it up, but just if you wanted to, raise your hand if you could look that up. Yeah, most of us could, right? Most of us could. The technology is right there in our pocket for most of us. Now raise your hands if you counted your steps manually today. That's weird, nobody did that. I was in a conference once, right, where I asked that question and some lady raised her hand and she's like, oh yeah, that's me. I come to find out, because I called her out on it, I'm like, what, are you serious? And she totally misunderstood the question, but I thought, there's no way this lady's counting her steps manually every day, right? All right, so I can't imagine trying to do that. Even on a piece of paper, putting tick marks, right? Nobody would do it. Even though Harvard Medical School came out and said, walking is the closest thing we have to a wonder drug. If it's the closest thing we have to a wonder drug, would it be worth counting them manually? I mean, maybe. So, why did so few people start counting their steps before 2012? All right, pedometers, which count steps, can date back as far as Leonardo da Vinci, right? He actually came up with an invention that would count the number of steps people would take. But we all know that technology has really evolved over time. And it's made counting steps more accurate and more accessible, and the results, more visible. And we know that when performance is measured, performance improves. In fact, Multiple studies have shown that if you count your steps, right, not manually, but with your phone or a watch, that people who do that consistently walk an average of an extra mile every day. So what about in driver recruiting? What's the wonder drug, and how would you measure it? So we asked drivers to try to figure this thing out. If you're serious about a specific job, what's your first move? What do you think? What does a driver do? First thing, if they're really interested about a job, what do they do? Oh, good answer over there, but I heard the right answer. Call. Boom. 43, almost 44% of drivers, the very first move they make is call. So in the past year, we've generated 1.2 million leads for our clients. Almost half of those leads are phone calls. What's happening on all of those phone calls? Do you know? Conversations? What kind of conversations? Sales conversations? You hope. You hope, right? So I mentioned before I was a director of recruiting at a really big fleet. And I remember walking around the floor, listening to my recruiters' conversations and thinking, dang, we're crushing it. Like, we're killing it. We're having awesome conversations. But I was only ever hearing one side of that conversation. But once I started to dig into the call recordings, I was like, we got some work to do. We got some work to do, right? So if you recall the efficiency formula that I had up here earlier, right? The ability to commit a driver to working with you has the single biggest impact of any other step in your hiring process, right? I showed you mathematically that that's true, that the ability to commit a driver to come to work with you has the single biggest impact of any other step in your hiring process. So there are systems out there that could be considered, right? If we're saying calls are the wonder drug, that's it. Answering the phone, that's the wonder drug. There are systems out there that can provide you with the data just like the Fitbit can analyze your steps. This can analyze your phone calls, okay? So not only is it going to give you your answered versus unanswered phone calls, but you can dig in deep to just your answered and say, oh, what percentage were eligible of when we picked up the phone and we spoke with the driver? But let's take it a step further. Of those that were eligible that we spoke with, how many times did our recruiters take an action with them, get something done? How many times did we fill out the application with them? How many times did we just send them an email and say, yeah, go fill out the application? Or ineligible or not interested as well, right? Wouldn't it be nice to know, of the drivers who we said were ineligible on a phone call, what were some of those reasons? How about not interested? What were some of those reasons? Why aren't they interested? That gives us real intel into what we can do with our fleet to make some significant differences. All right, so I mentioned at the beginning that a couple fleets went out of business, right, and we want to stay relevant. So one of those fleets operated out of Florida, and I was curious who they hauled for. I'm like, hey, they're out of business. I'm sure there's a lot of fleets out there would love to know what kind of freight they're hauling. So I did a lane search in Florida, and I'm able to look at inspection data. So now I know, hey, that fleet that went out of business, their top shipper was International Paper. And using inspection data, I could say, okay, out of these 41 inspections in the state of Florida, what fleets were running that freight? And I've got it blocked off here so you can't see intentionally. But now I can look at all the fleets running International Paper out of Florida and sort them by their ISS score, so that now I have some competitive advantage intelligence that says, hey, I see that my competitor's getting more freight than I am. Look look at their safety score compared to mine. I need to go, give me some of that freight. They're spending all day in the inspection lanes. We're not. Right? So we're talking about technology that gives you a competitive advantage. Never a better time than now to get some of that. So call insights being the wonder drug, freight finds. There's software out there that can do just that. All right, let's talk about partners. Catch up here. All right, there we go. All right, so we asked our client advisory board, how many advertising vendors do you use? What do you think? Somebody throw a number out there. How many advertising vendors on average do people use? There you go. All right. So for our client advisory board, they use on average 11.6 different vendors. The range went from some just using 2 to some using up to 26 different vendors. Now I bring that up because people are taking this opportunity right now to cut down on their vendors and say, gosh, we don't need to, a lot of them are doing lead gen, we don't need that many vendors. So I just wanted to provide you with a quick model here of how do you decide which vendors to work with. So I love to use this chart, it's the 4 levels of value and relationship, to talk about that. Are your vendors just convenient vendors who have a product? It might be a good product, right? Or maybe they're a preferred supplier, meaning they bring good service to the table. So they've got good products, they've got good service. But a necessary partner is somebody who gets you results. And then the top level there of value and relationship is, are they bringing advice to the table? So, okay, they're not in here. I stopped by a booth today and was just chatting with some folks, and one of them said, hey, we're thinking about switching our vendors because our current vendor doesn't give us any intel or insights. I mean, we think they're doing a good job for us, but we don't actually know. What just happened? It's all right, we'll keep rolling. All right. So whatever vendors you decide to work with, please make sure they're getting you results, right? And hopefully they're providing a platform, a way for you to be able to log in and see what's your daily performance look like. Are they actually helping you get hires? Yeah, look at that. Phone call data we already talked about. It's all good. And creative asset management, right? Is there platforms being provided that says, look, we're getting you results and we can prove it? And then when it comes to advice, are you able to call your vendors up and say, hey, we're thinking about getting some freight, in the Lakeland, Florida area? Can you tell us how difficult it is to hire in that area? How much should we be paying drivers there? What's the driver density look like? What kind of benefits are they offering there? That's the type of advice that you should be able to get from your vendors that you're working with, because then they're not actually vendors, but they're partners and advisors. So when it comes to partners, results and advice. All right, so now we've talked about the problem. I've thrown a whole lot at you when it comes to solutions. And now for the next just few minutes as we wrap up, and I'll go through it quickly so we end on time, we're going to talk about ways to make these tough decisions. A North Star, some type of guiding principle that says, dude, you just threw so much at me. Like, where do we start? How should we go about making these decisions? All right, so let's jump right in. All right, so economic value has changed over time, okay? So I like to use the example of a birthday cake because it's easy for us to understand and see that we used to make birthday cakes from scratch, and it probably cost less than $1 to get all the ingredients. Well, Betty Crocker learned that people would pay about 5 times more if you just put some of the ingredients in a box already. Well, over time, it continued to progress to where, hey, for about 5 times as much, don't even buy the box. Just go to the store, order your cake, and they'll decorate it how you want. Well, now we've progressed to what we call an experience economy, where you can go to Chuck E. Cheese, you can get your cake thrown in for free, you got your pizza, you got your entertainment, and it's an experience for the kids. So like I mentioned before, we now operate in what's called an experience economy. And that's based on the idea that we're selling experiences rather than just products or services. Now, customer experience has actually overtaken price and product as the key brand differentiator. So you may be thinking like, okay, but yeah, what does this have to do with us in the room, right? Well, drivers do not live in a bubble, right? They're consumers, they're customers, so their expectations are influenced by the consumer world, by the customer world. So maybe then, knowing that we're in an experience economy, we should really be focused on creating these big wow moments for our drivers and our employees, right? So I went out and found some research I had the question, what happens when you exceed expectations? Well, you do in fact shift the curve over from, fewer disloyal, fewer neutral to more loyal customers. Okay, so maybe that's it. Maybe that's the North Star. We should just be focused on creating these over-the-top experiences, right? Well, before we jump into that, what happens when you just meet expectations? Well, the research shows that you actually end up getting a whole lot fewer disloyal clients, and you move a bunch of them over to neutral. So, what's more important, right? Well, I think this little bit of research that goes along with us helps us make that decision, which is people will tell someone 65% more of the time about a negative customer experience than a positive one, which is only about 25%. So, that being said, we're way better off trying to avoid negative experiences than trying to create these over-the-top ones. And we work in an industry where word of mouth still really, really matters, right? In fact, when looking for a job, what's the most important way to research a fleet? What do you think drivers said? This was a driver survey. What's the most important way to research a fleet? Talk to a driver. Yep, that's the number one answer, 100%. Talk to a driver. So, big wow moments is actually the wrong strategy, even though we're in an experience economy. All right, so what does it take to do this, right? What drives disloyalty? Well, 4 of the 5 top reasons for driving disloyalty have to do with the amount of effort that somebody has to put into something. So, quick example here. Facebook bought a company back in 2012 for $1 billion. And the industry laughed at them. They said, "You jokers. Why would you buy somebody for $1 billion? That's crazy." Because who they bought was a free app that only had 13 employees that had only been around for 2 years. Oh, and by the way, that app was designed by 2 dudes in a coffee shop who had designed an app before that failed miserably. So what on earth did Facebook see in them? 2 words. 3 clicks. That's all it took to take a picture from your phone and post it on social media. Instagram is estimated to be worth $100 billion today. So, goes to show you that investing in an effortless experience can really pay off. All right, so what about in the driver world, right? This is a real website. I tried to block out all the names. I hope I did it well. But this was not a good user experience as a driver. I went through it, okay? Once again, I did secret shopping with good old Hank Seeker, and this was not a good experience. Let me give you a few numbers here that might help out. 7 is the maximum number of navigation items you should have on your homepage. Otherwise, traffic gets lost. 3 is the max number of clicks it should take to get to your application. 90 is the percentage of people coming from a cell phone, so make sure it's mobile first. And 2 is the max number of seconds it should take for your website to load, otherwise you lose as much as half of your traffic. So I went out and found a good example of the things that I just said, and once again tried to block it all out. But here it gives the driver the opportunity to quickly search what they're looking for, put city, state, zip in, boom, the job pops up. I can click on it. Once I click on the job, it's going to give me all the information I need about pay, gives me some details, has a call to action on the side. It made that experience for me as the driver very easy. I would go back and do it again, whereas the first one was not a good experience. Have you ever turned down a job because the pay didn't make sense? We asked drivers this. Any guess as to what percentage of drivers turned down a job because they couldn't understand how they were going to get paid? Very close, 79%. All right, I'm going to fly through the rest of this. All right, customer efforts. We often think of it as just being very physical or mental. How many steps do we have to take? In fact, the other 2/3 of it are how the person felt going through the experience. So I do a little YouTube show where I listen into recruiters and drivers' conversations and give some feedback. But you can see the level of trust that drivers have in recruiters, where a driver, Buster Morris, I hope you're not in here, because he called it lie training, which cracked me up. And then 2 more drivers thumbed that thing up, right? Thumbs up on that. If they would have watched the whole video, they would have known it's actually really driver-centric. It's all about the driver, but that's how they feel about recruiters. TurboTax does a phenomenal job. You can actually search 300,000 reviews to find people just like you to see if it's something you actually want to do. Then they have you post it on social media, and it gets a 30% more better conversion rate than their paid advertising does. Have you ever decided to quit a job because of the orientation process? 83% of drivers said they have. Just because of the orientation process, they quit. Experience is not lining up with expectations. Is the effort you're asking worth the experience you're offering? If not, you're losing drivers. Both current drivers and potential drivers. I feel loyal to my fleet because, number one answer, I don't. That was the number one answer. Why do you feel loyal to your fleet? Number one answer, I don't. We find that 1/3 of drivers are negative, looking for work, 1/3 of drivers are neutral, and 1/3 of drivers are having a positive experience, right? Don't focus on the neutral trying to make it great. Focus on the negative. Move them over to neutral. Driver Advisory Board. We asked a driver why he stuck with his current company for so long. He said they consistently do little things well. He'd been with the same company for 20 years, and that's why he stuck around. They consistently do the little things. He didn't say it's the big wow moments. They're always going over the top. They just do the little things well consistently. So to wrap it up here then, I often get people ask me the question, Seth, what's going to change in driver recruiting in the next 6 months or in the next year? It's a good question. It's a common question. And don't worry, we'll keep pushing out information to help you with that. But the better question is, what's not going to change in the next 5 to 10 years? You can build a business strategy on the things that are stable over time. Reduce effort, affect emotion, create simplicity. It's impossible to imagine a future where somebody says, Seth, I love Hank Transportation. I just wish you guys wouldn't take such good care of drivers. Or, hey, Seth, I'm really thinking about joining Hank Transportation. I just wish you added more steps to your hiring process. It's just way too easy. It's impossible. They'll never say it. So the time, the effort, the money that you put in right now into these things will be paying dividends for years to come. And it'll be worth the effort. When you know something is true, stick to it. There's never been a better time than now to be the easy choice. Perfect. Thank you all. Appreciate you.